I want to talk to you today about blackmail and about how in my opinion, the bigger story here is that you're having a public-private partnership develop. And you have federal government agencies, not only in this case, but in others as well, also with the censorship establishment, also with, ironically, some of the moves they have against the Second Amendment, and also when it comes to surveilling you and possibly blackmailing you. And there's some real examples of this. They tried to do it to Tucker Carlson and other people, which I'll explain in a bit. That works through a collaboration between private companies and the government. And what they've found is that private companies are not held to the Constitution. A private company can censor you. A private company can collect private data on you. A private company can do all kinds of things against you. And it's not the government infringing on your rights if they partner with a private company that violates your rights. And I'll go deeper into this because this is in my opinion, one of the more concerning things we see developing in the West. Ironically, of the fascist nature, a public-private partnership designed to create a tyranny through government collaborating with, ironically, the capitalistic system. You could call it a type of socialism, but let's dig into it a bit further. Wired magazine had this story. I should point out the couple sources here I want to go over. First off is Wired. The other one is The Intercept. Neither of which are quote unquote right wing websites, which are normally the ones you'd expect to be on these stories. But they had some interesting breaking stories, and I'll give my take on them. Wired magazine reported the U.S. is openly stockpiling dirt on all its citizens. They're getting a big old blackmail database on every American citizen. It says the United States government has been secretly amassing a large amount of sensitive and intimate information on its own citizens. A group of senior advisors informed Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, more than a year ago. The size and scope of the government effort to accumulate data revealing the minute details of Americans' lives are described soberly and at length by the director's own panel of experts in a newly declassified report. Haines at first tasked her advisors in late 2021 with untangling a web of secretive business arrangements, between commercial data brokers and U.S. intelligence community members. What that report ended up saying constitutes a nightmare scenario for privacy defenders. Quote, the report reveals what we feared most, says Sean Vitka, a policy attorney at the nonprofit Demand Progress. Quote, intelligence agencies are flouting the law and buying information about Americans that Congress and the Supreme Court have made clear the government should not have. And another quote from Ron Wyden, a U.S. Senator from Oregon, says, quote, I've been warning for years that if using a credit card to buy an American's personal information voids their Fourth Amendment rights, then traditional checks and balances for government surveillance will crumble. I'll give my brief take on this, and I'll go into the second part because the second part ties into this. What it's saying, in other words, is that the federal government, so under the Constitution, under the Fourth Amendment, you are protected from illegal searches and seizures. I've done it before where, if an officer pulls you over, I respect police. I have family in the police. I respect them. But I'm not going to let them enact things against me they don't have the legal right to do. And so if, for example, you're asked to be searched, you can say, well, are you asking me or are you telling me? Which, should clarify whether they're asking to search you, which if you grant them the right to do so, then they can do it. If you say, yeah, go ahead and search me, they can search you and your rights go out the window because you've consented to it. But if they say, I'm telling you, you don't have the right to consent. And if they're telling you, it's fair to ask, well, what is your probable cause? Because you cannot search without probable cause, or without a warrant for that matter. Those are the rights you have as a citizen. Those are constitutionally protected rights. The government cannot just go in and randomly search you. They can't put their hands in your pockets. They can't do a lot of things like this unless you're under arrest, unless you've committed a crime, or unless they have a warrant, essentially. They have to have a reason to do it, a probable cause that will allow them to carry out that act. Otherwise, it is a constitutional violation. Now, the issue you have is that in our pockets now, tech has created a whole new slew of problems on your computer, at your work. Everything is surveilling you. Everything. Your smartphone is surveilling you. It records both audio and video. Or it can at least. All your contacts, every text message you write, every website you visit, your website. Let's put it this way: if you access an app like Facebook or Twitter and you grant it access to your video and to your audio, or if you have, for example, Skype installed or you have any other application installed that you have given the right to access both video and audio, those apps can then collect that data and sell it. And they do. They sell it to advertisers. If you, for example, are on a text messaging app, like just about any of them, they can collect that data, those that store it at least, and some of them have to store it for legal reasons because the government needs to, in the case of a crime being committed, such and such, they need to be able to surveil those conversations, terrorist suspect and that, again, going back to the Patriot Act and George Bush, they were given the ability to violate certain constitutional rights if you are a suspected terrorist. And lo and behold, where we are today, where the definition of terrorist has been so broadly defined, or terror suspect or terror threat, that if you are a Christian conservative or just someone who believes in basic constitutional values, you might be labeled a terrorist, which means your constitutional rights go right flying out that big old window. You also, for example, every website you visit, if not by a third-party company that can track that stuff, is being surveilled by your internet provider, your IP. And the company you get your internet from will have a record of every single website you have ever visited. Now, those are also picked up by websites themselves. Certain websites have what are called cookies. You might notice some websites say this website uses certain cookies. Will you allow them? And you click yes or no. Those cookies are able to surveil you as well, and they will track your internet activity across multiple web pages. Now, a lot of companies sell this data. They sell it to advertisers, and those advertisers then build portfolios, portraits of you based on your IP address, which is your unique web signature, tied to you as an individual, or to your internet bill every month, or to your cell phone bill every month. And those providers are able to serve you ads. They sell it to people. The problem you have now is that database, every website you visit, every conversation you have, everything you do on the internet or your phone can be purchased as well by the government. And not even just the U.S. government, but even by foreign governments. It brings about a problem then that the government can violate that constitutional barrier of getting this private information on you. Now, some people would say, well, it's for counterterrorism stuff. It's not about blackmail. They tried doing it to Tucker Carlson. If you remember when it was alleged that Tucker Carlson was communicating with Putin, remember the reality was he had been reaching out to Putin for an interview. He was trying to interview Putin. And there were threats that someone was going to leak his conversations with Putin. It was going to be framed as a giant threat. Someone in the government provided to the media damaging information against him. Again, taking that public-private partnership, not just between big tech and the government, but between the government and big media. We saw the same things happen in other regards where people... media received leaked information from within the government. We saw Trump be a huge target of that, for example. And it's fair to argue it's not the government doing it. It's a rogue employee. It's a rogue politician. It's a rogue individual. But that's the problem. What is the punishment for those people? Who went to jail for leaking information about Trump? Who got punished for it? They were not punished. Many of them were actually rewarded for it. And so you have this problem that this information, damning information being collected on you, can and will be used against you. Not in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion. They can assassinate your character by selectively leaking information tied to you. I find that deeply concerning, especially when you get into the ideas of, where this is heading just culturally. And also, if you understand the same thing is being used in other regards, the censorship establishment, we know from the Twitter files, was functioning in the same way. The censorship establishment in the Twitter files was showing that the FBI and other agencies were colluding with Facebook, with Twitter, with other social networks, and they were advising them on individuals, direct individuals, and on certain narratives to censor. And we found out later that many of those narratives were actually true, and the narratives they were pushing in their place were false. They were pushing what would constitute government lies, propaganda, false information, while suppressing real information. A violation, again, of our First Amendment right. And so here we have violations to both the First and Fourth Amendments being carried out through a public-private partnership. And I find that very concerning personally. And it's not just that. Let me show you a bit more.